Well, hello and welcome to a very special edition of Webinar Wednesdays, a celebration of International Women's Day, also known as IWD 2022. I'm Gala Solomon, Director of Marketing and Communications with Ben-Gurion University, Canada, and it's my pleasure to be your host and moderator today. The theme for IWD 2022 is Break the Bias. And while many inroads have been made when it comes to women's rights and gender equality, women continue to fight for pay equity and fight against discrimination in the workplace and elsewhere. So no doubt we still have a long road ahead of us. In a moment, I will introduce the new female president of the Montreal chapter of Ben-Gurion University, Canada, Peggy Cohen-Rabinovich, who will introduce our guest of honor. But first, I'm excited to share that we are looking forward to returning to in-person gatherings in the coming months. We have officially announced live and in-person events at 4 of our Canadian regions. On June 9th, we will be hosting the Ben-Gurion University Sustainability and Climate Change Gala at the Fairmont Pacific Rim in Vancouver. The event honors RBC Regional President Martin Thibodeau and will feature a fireside chat with BGU President Professor Daniel Shamovitz. Tickets for our Winnipeg event, an evening commemorating the 50th anniversary of the 1972 Munich massacre that claimed the lives of 9 Israeli athletes, began selling last week, and they are going fast. The event will take place June 14th and will feature the documentary After Munich. Further east, Montreal is gearing up for its annual celebration, the main event, which will feature cantor Gideon Zellermeyer and BGU President Professor Daniel Shamovitz. And just last week, we issued a save the date for the Future Is Now Gala, which will feature the legendary Hollywood actor Michael J. Fox. The event will be held November 6th at the Fairmont Royal York in downtown Toronto. Sponsorship opportunities for our events are available, so please do take the time to speak with your regional executive director for further details. And now I'm pleased to introduce Ben-Gurion University Canada's Montreal region freshly minted president, Peggy Cohen-Rabinovich. Peggy, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Galit. Today on International Women's Day, I am honored to welcome our VP for Diversity and Inclusion, Professor Sarab Abu Rabia Kader, a remarkable woman on all counts. Born in 1976, Professor Kader became the first female Bedouin Israeli to earn a PhD. After earning her doctorate at Ben-Gurion University, she joined the Department of Education and taught Bedouin culture and Arab feminism. Professor Kader is the first Arab woman from the Negev promoted to a professorship at BGU. And we know you will lead the way for others. In June 2021, the university appointed Professor Kader to the new post of Vice President for Equality and Diversity, where she is responsible for equal representation of Arabs, women, those with disabilities, Ethiopian immigrants, Haredim, and the LGBTQ communities. Here are Professor Kader's inspiring words. My research over the years has led me to understand the need for correcting injustices. I have the burning desire to help the other, to be there at the points that can make a difference. And what a difference you make. Professor Kader has received many awards, most recently receiving the 2022 Paris Center for Peace and Innovation Medal of Distinction. The Medal of Distinction recognizes women from a diverse range of backgrounds and communities who are leaders in their fields and serve as role models for women and girls everywhere. Who better to address us today? Professor Kader, we are honored by your presence and looking forward to your words. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good evening and happy Women's Day. I'm really excited to be here. I would like first to thank you all for this invitation and for the opportunity to tell my story and present my work in my new role as a Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion. Since this evening we're celebrating Women's Day with the theme of breaking the bias, I would like to give you a glance of how Bedouin women break the bias, starting with my own personal journey in different stops in my life as both an Arab and as a woman. I will tell you a bit about my background. I was born in the city of Beersheba to a father who came from an unrecognized village, Bedouin village in the southern part of the Negev, and to a mother from the northern part of Israel. My father is the first Bedouin doctor from the Negev. He studied in a boarding school in the north of Israel during the military administration period that took place between 1948 and 1966. Since my father's family lived in tents during the 50s and the 60s, he suffered from lack of decent basic conditions of living. Thus, he did not want his family to suffer as well. So he wanted a better circumstances for us. Thus, he moved to Beersheba, where he also worked in a hospital. However, as Arabs living in the city, like many other Arab families, we lacked Arab-speaking educational frameworks, such as schools or kindergartens. So I studied in a Bedouin town called Tel Sheva, Tel Saber, in order to keep my language and identity. When I reached high school, commuting was difficult, and I moved to a Jewish Hebrew speaking school in the city of Beersheba, just near home. Those years formed my identity as a woman and as a Bedouin Arab Muslim girl. The first years of studying in a Jewish high school were during the first Intifada, where students met for the first time with an Arab Muslim girl that was different from the image they used to see in the news. It was not an easy journey to be the only Arab girl among hundreds of kids suffering from racist behaviors and microaggressions from other kids. Fortunately, my school staff was very tolerant and they backed me up. But during war times, I was always questioned by my friends. What do I think about this? How I interpret it? Why it happens, and so on. So I had a lot of burden on my shoulders, okay, instead of being a normative teenager. At the end of high school, when all my friends went to the army, I started to study at Ben-Gurion University. I was 18, entering the university meant for me re-encountering my Bedouin roots beside my relatives. At 1995, we were only 8 Bedouin women coming from different tribes, and for all of us, it was the first time that we met a Bedouin woman from another tribe or a different village. During those years at the university, I also started to work as a school teacher in a Bedouin town. At those times, there was a lack in Bedouin teachers who are university graduates. So I was recruited immediately to teach Hebrew and English, first at an elementary school and then in the high school. During the years, I started to notice the gaps and differences between the high school that I studied in, comparing to the school I was teaching at, in terms of massive gaps, lack of science laboratories, professional teachers, equipment, and alike. I also noticed that at the period between the elementary school and high school, many Bedouin girls drop out from the schools. I started to study this phenomenon and wrote my master thesis on this topic that was used later on by human rights organizations and educational NGOs to demand equal treatment for Bedouin schools, especially for Bedouin girls. So my attention to Bedouin girls and women started to develop, and very soon I found myself attracted to the feminist activism at a very young age. I started to volunteer in different groups and initiatives that aim to empower women. During the late 90s, Bedouin society did not have so many feminist NGOs, and together with few friends, we decided to establish a feminist organization that aimed to voice taboo issues that other NGOs hesitated to touch, such as polygamy, tribal marriages, honor killing, and even sexual education for girls. I remember that those issues were not easily absorbed, since most activities activists were very busy with issues of education and employment, which are legitimate issues, very legitimate issues. However, I could not bear the fact that women, at the same time that they receive higher education and go to work, they are also being killed. They also suffer from violence. They also suffer from polygamy. So I was among the first women who dared to voice those issues, even if we had to confront patriarchal resistance. Our status as educated professional women helped us to break the silence around those topics. Another taboo issue that I fought was marrying outside the tribal limits. After I finished my master's studies, I met my husband, who was from a different Bedouin tribe. That marriage between our tribes were forbidden according to traditional norms, but not according to Islam, which allowed me to marry any other Muslim man. I was never told by my parents to whom I am allowed to marry, to whom I allowed to marry, and to whom I am not. These were not the values I was raised on. For me, he is a man, a human being that I chose, just like any other woman on earth, but I didn't know what struggle I am entering myself into. Since marital relations between tribes from different statuses was forbidden, after our engagement, my father's tribe resisted these relations. It took us 2 years to fight for it. I will not tell you the details of this story, but why I'm telling you this story? I'm telling this story to show you how my struggle, okay, my personal story turned into a feminist, but also a research story. Even if it took us 2 years to insist on our right, eventually we succeeded. So my struggle during those years was not only for a man, it was on my right to choose, which according to my religion was a right that was given to me. So to cope with this amazing struggle, I turned my personal story into a research story to give a voice to other Bedouin women, especially educated women who struggled with the same issue. So I wrote my PhD dissertation on the first generation of Bedouin women who entered higher educational institutions in Israel. The main question that led my research concerned their academic, professional, and personal journeys as women, as educated, and as minority women, and how from these intersectional marginal locations, they produced their agency both in the public sphere and in the tribal sphere. I found out that these women make change by promoting one social norm while preserving others. Maybe this paradox, maybe this sentence might seem or sound like a paradox, but we work in paradoxes here in Israel and in Bedouin society. And I will explain. These women felt in love with men outside their permitted tribal boundaries, but their families and tribes were not ready to this kind of change in the tribal structure of Bedouin society. One woman told me that I interviewed, that she was ready to run away with her forbidden love, but at the last minute, she stopped thinking how her act would affect other women from her own family. So she, like others, decided to give up on this social norm, marrying outside the tribal limits, in order to keep her image as a role model for other women in her family and tribe, to keep the second generation of Bedouin women's enrollment into higher education. This journey that I went through with these women was a healing process for both of us, that in itself is an act of resistance. Today, we see a huge number of Arab women attending higher education, and they even constitute 60% out of all students. So these stops in my life that I told you about are part of my journey, part of my identity, and also part of the agenda that I teach. I teach about sociology of racism. I teach about feminist in Arab society. These are the issues that close to me in my research as well as in my activism. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you so much for that, Sarab. And of course, we're going to get into a conversation, an in-depth conversation with some questions that we've sent you away, but also I'd like to remind the audience that you can share your questions. It's a fascinating story. It's a very interesting angle that we don't necessarily hear about all the time. So we'd love to hear your questions. Please do make sure that you use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. But for now, Sarab, I'd like to begin by asking about your appointment to the newly created role of Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion with BGU. Tell us more about your role, why it was created, and what it means to you.
The role of Vice President for Diversity and Inclusion, first of all, is a new role established in the universities in all Israel. So the reason for creating this role are various. First, if you remember the May events last year where racism and violence were escalated between Arab and Jewish citizens, this violence entered also campuses in all over Israel and has badly affected the fragile relations between Arab and Jewish in all campuses. So those cracks were only the top of the ice that revealed a lot of gaps, of distances and non-diverse climates that needed a restart. So in my role, I am responsible for bringing diversity and inclusion to all minority groups, Arab, women, LGBT, Haredim, Ethiopian, and more. So the diversity, as I see it, contains 4 principles, and it's like a puzzle that we need all the parts in order to promote diversity and inclusion. So the first principle is access and continuity, which means opening the gates for underrepresented groups that face academic and economic barriers that we try to remove by giving special programs for certain groups, followed with educational and economic support, mentoring to minimize dropouts, and so on. The second principle refers to inclusion. Inclusion means turning the campus climate into a warm climate where underrepresented groups would feel less alienated to the university and more belonging. Studies show that students and staff who feel more belonging, they would be more committed and successful in their studies. To increase the feeling of belonging, we provide cultural events, staff training, open lectures, and tours in order to make them feel more included in campus. The third principle includes preventing racism on campus. In this regard, our aim is to prevent racism and raise awareness to this topic. So I established a committee on complaints of discrimination and racism. We do professional training for professional staff on dealing with racism and minority groups, and also established an emergency forum for political crisis situation led by the president himself. The unique here is that we're not running away from the big challenges, but we deal with them, especially as BGU is located at the south amidst conflict zone on the one hand and a peripheral on the other. The fourth part refers to dialogue between groups through shared space. Since Arab and Jews meet on the first time only at the university, there is a great potential for encounter. However, this potential is not fully fulfilled. So my fantasy here is to establish a unit for shared life and dialogue where students from different backgrounds could meet, talk, or just get to know each other, to deal with the conflict, but also to take tours together, for instance. So I prepared a plan to implement it. It would not be easy because sometimes we also face those radical groups outside the campus, that resist all this kind of meeting and dialogues and try to turn it into a political propaganda. So you ask, what is the meaning of this role for me? For me, is to establish a basic ground to deal with inequality gaps, political crises that affect our BGU community. I see our university role as affecting the space we live in, part of the ecosystem approach. University role, as I see it, is not only to produce knowledge, but also to create a graduate, who will become a citizen with social awareness to equity and responsibility to his or her community. It is also our responsibility as an academic institute to integrate marginal groups into academia and later to the labor market and the academic leadership by perceiving them not as a burden, but as an asset.
it's very interesting, in listening to your story as you were sharing it with us, you spoke about moments of being marginalized yourself, whether it was in high school or in other moments in life. How do you bring your personal experience, or what aspect of your personal experience are you bringing to this new role that you've taken on?
This is a new question that you didn't
It
send
is a
me.
new question. Yeah.
It just came up. Yes,
I
it's easier to communicate. Yes, on what part of my personal story I'm bringing to this role. First of all, the experience of my living as a minority, as a woman, in an Arab society, all this mixed intersectional locations of my life, marginal, but at the same time very powerful, because these experiences actually formed my identity and formed my awareness to marginalized groups. So I feel that other marginalized groups, not only Arabs, we could teach them from our own experience. I mean, we are the marginalized people, those who were affected by racism, those who were affected by a gender penalty or tribal penalty, like I call it, can actually advise, okay, first of all, understand the experience of other marginalized group and put ourselves in their own shoes, okay, and feel their experience. So I think maybe, and this is what I bring to my role, the understanding, the experience, and the awareness of what other marginalized, underrepresented group need in order to enter the university, to access university, and also to continue, not to drop out from the university.
Right. Okay. I'll go back to one of the questions that we submitted to you ahead of time. Of course, yesterday officially was International Women's Day, and the theme you alluded to and we alluded to earlier in this talk is break the bias. How do you interpret this mission of breaking the bias?
Well, first of all, I have to say that it took me a lot to think about this question, what it means to break the bias. Have we break the bias? So breaking the bias is a mission that never ends. Even when we as women reach higher positions, it is still difficult for some men to see us part of the leadership. Still, men assume that they deserve to be in leading roles more than women, especially when we refer to patriarchal societies. So you are more challenged both as a woman in a patriarchal Arab society and also as an Arab in a Jewish hegemonic society. You always have to prove for both sides that you are a professional, even if you are a woman or an Arab woman. And this happens because we do not have enough women or Arab women or women from other marginalized groups in leading positions, both inside and outside academia in general. So for me to break the bias is to be able to be perceived as capable of doing my work, not only as a woman, but also as an Arab woman. For me, as coming from a minority group, my minority experience contribute to the understanding of other minorities and to facilitate the way for them. So in this regard, I just would like to mention my latest book, which was published in Hebrew 2017 about professional Bedouin women in leading positions, and they all suffered from biases that the literature call penalties. And I found 4 penalties in this study: the ethnic penalty, which refers to the working sphere, being perceived unprofessional because you are an Arab woman; the gender penalty, which refers to the family sphere, perceived non-professional because you are a woman; the religious penalty, being tagged as a Muslim; and the tribal penalty, being expected to act according to tribal codes when they are in conflict with professional codes. So the paradox of this study is that the more women in higher positions, the more they face these penalties. So I really hope that I will not, breaking the bias for me means that I will not have to face these penalties anymore, but we're not there yet.
We're not there yet. Yeah, the road is still long, right? And of course, as a member of the Bedouin community, what is your relationship with the Bedouin student community at BGU, especially when it comes to the younger generation of women, because you have such an interest too in the female experience?
Right. First of all, upon entering my role, I received a lot of congratulations really from all, but especially from Bedouin students, and more precisely, female students who saw me as their role models. When I studied at BGU, when I started my studies, I didn't have any female role model in campus to absorb some strength for her, to follow her leads, and to be able to say, I can too. So I am also a great believer in this format of role models. So I also started a project for female PhD students that is based on role modeling. And the aim of this group is to empower Arab Bedouin research students, especially from the first generation, who actually didn't have academic role models in their own families. So the aim of this meeting is not only to empower them academically, but also to give them more strength and more power, okay, to empower them on as women, that they also can and able to succeed at the university. For Bedouin community in general, and we have two programs that aims to ease their access to higher education, but this is something that I will not elaborate on right now. I can say that the Bedouin young generation, especially females, sometimes they approach me in certain issues instead of approaching the professional units that need to deal with these issues, because they feel more comfortable to speak, to approach. It's like a safe space for them. So I've been only 4 months on this role, in this position, so it's still early to say.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. Now, looking ahead to the future for a moment, when we meet again, let's say in 5 years, I mean, we've talked about, the fact that the road is still long ahead of us. While inroads have been made, there's still a lot of work that still needs to be done. But if we meet again in 5 years, or when we meet again in 5 years to mark International Women's Day, what would be the top 3 goals that you would want to achieve by then? And how do you see the landscape of advancing women in academia and universities as a whole down the line?
Okay, I will thank you for that. This is really an important question that I think each woman has to ask herself. How do you see the landscape of advancing women in the academia or in your positions? So I will try to answer your question from my own point of view. So first of all, I ask myself every year 2 main questions. First, how did I achieve my goals? In this regard, the way I did it, how I did it is not less important than the goal itself. We should ask ourselves, what were the difficulties, the challenges, how we overcome them, how we facilitate them, with whom? Who were my partners? Should I have different strategy? So, like I said, one of the strategies that I think of is creating alliances with other powerful women and other groups who have the same interest to promote diversity. And to achieve goals is not an individual mission. It is a common mission that with the right people in the right time, you can achieve it. So choosing who walks with you in this path is a significant to your success. The second question is what other goals I want to accomplish that I have not accomplished yet. And here, I think we must prioritize our goals and ask ourselves what is more or less relevant in certain time. What is the acute issue that needs our attention now, that needs the university's attention now or in this year? So when I entered my role, the first thing that I saw that my university needed is to balance the shake we all experienced last May, and started with establishing a common base for action. Regarding the question of advancing women in academia as a whole, let me say that our academia in Israel is hegemonically white. Minorities are underrepresented and minority women even less. In this regard, I really want to see women and other marginalized communities having more or equal opportunities to access higher education, to achieve professional academic resources for a better future. I really want to see our university open to all kinds of marginal groups, such as Haredim, even if it means a temporal time, even if it means temporarily a separate tracks. In this dilemma between equal opportunities or gender equality, I can tell you from my own experience that equal opportunities challenges gender inequality. So we must believe in the power of higher education as changing the lives of women, especially in traditional conservative communities. It takes time, as I show from the Bedouin case, but it's a time that's worth investing in. The second thing that I want to see our university more diverse in terms of faculty, more women and more diverse group in leading roles. So this is the only way to promote a real diverse and inclusive institution. So I can say that the more we have women in leading position, at least 50% of women, not only white hegemonic women, but also women from underrepresented groups, the more we can be diverse and the less we need role such as mine.
We're going to start taking some questions from the audience now, and I'll begin with a question that comes to us from Richard Levy. You just made a reference to the Haredi women. So he asks, how do you approach Haredi women in your role at BGU in order for them to relate to you? And do you have more difficulty with Haredi men?
First of all, I started in establishing a committee to promote this topic among the Haredi. But like I said, I believe in role models. So I approach Haredi women from campus that work in campus. We have a professor and we have also some PhD students who are very, very active in this topic. This topic is very important for them. They have the ideas. They have the, the right way to do it. They know the strategies, how to do it. They are familiar with the needs of their own communities. So I believe that when we start to establish a ground, first of all, a base in the role of a committee, professional committee from professional members who know what they are doing, we can start, first of all, to map the needs of this community in the Negev. Is this community ready for mixed studies, or they are willing to study only in separate tracks? Now, regarding the differences between women and Haredi men and women, from my knowledge and familiarity, I know that it is more or easily, it is much easier to accept Haredi women, because even in a separate tracks, because they are ready to study or to be taught by both men and male and female professors, which is not the case among Haredi men. And so, like I said, to start a change, it's not only in the conservative society itself, it's also in the modern liberal sphere of the university. It takes time. So step by step, like I said, the dilemma here is between what I hear is between the equal opportunities or gender inequality. But like I said, I believe that equal opportunities, even in separate tracks, is a strategy, okay, that can lead us to challenge gender inequalities, because I do believe in the power of higher education, especially for women, in changing and challenging their own societies. But the scale of time is different in these communities than through the white gaze, or through the West, or through the white, the Western, or how the Western gaze perceive change. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, yeah, you did. It seems like you would have to really customize the strategy that you use with each community, because the needs tend to be different in each community. Can you speak about that as well? I mean, you can't approach everyone with sort of a blanket way of dealing with some of the issues that I'm sure present as challenges.
Yes. If we take, for instance, Arab or Bedouin and Ethiopians, We have for the Arab or for the Bedouin community in the Negev, which is the most marginalized community in the Negev. I think you are all here familiar with the background of the very weakened educational system and so on. So they need special tracks. They don't mind have special separated tracks, not genderly separated, but ethnically separated, like Charles Academia, Gateway to Academy. And we have another program soon next year called Momentum that aims to bring those students to a special year where instead of accepting them according to the psychometric exam, according to the grades of the psychometric exam, they will be accepted by other still academic ground. If we compare this track, okay, we cannot apply or imply this track for Ethiopian Jewish community. The Ethiopian community refuses to be separated from other Israeli tracks because it's something that they feel is biased. They feel that it's something that tags them, increase stereotypes against them. And just in case, I also studied I studied the Ethiopian community, Ethiopian students in higher educational system. I received from the Ministry of Science and Technology a grant to study this community, and they resist in all ways separate tracks for them because they feel it is something that full of stereotypes. They don't want to be stereotyped. So we have to here, as the not only me, but also the committee, we have also committee for Ethiopian, advancing Ethiopians in academy with Ethiopian representative from the university that we try all the time to think how we balance between those special barriers that Ethiopian deal with, how to remove those barriers without, or how to approach the community without tagging the community.
Very good. Thank you for that. Anonymous question coming in, and the question is, are there more Bedouin women and other marginalized communities in line to be advanced up the academic ladder? It has taken a long time to promote leaders like you. Will promotions happen faster in the future, in your opinion?
Wow. Unfortunately, I cannot speak of BGU. I can give you a very large picture of the situation of Arab academics in Israel in general. Mm-hmm. Today, we had a conference for PhD doctorate students, Arab female students, that to promote them. Like I mentioned the project, and today we had a session on the working opportunities after PhDs. I would like to tell you that in Israel, there are more than 500 PhD female Arab students, candidates. However, overall, we have only 3.1% Arab, including Druze and Cherkess, faculty in all the academia in Israel, a huge gap. So if we don't have, on the other side, we have more female students in the undergraduate studies, 60% of Arab and female students, okay, are women, 60% of the Arab and Bedouin students are female. Which means that on the one hand, we see a very high increase in the enrollment of Arab female and Bedouin females into higher education. But when we go up in the ladder, master's degree and PhDs, it decreases, okay? It does not increase the same rates as the undergraduate. So also entering faculty positions is also very small. So I assume that in terms of statistics, also approaching or achieving leading position will also be a very slow process. I believe it could happen, but it is very slow. It is slow because the opening the gate to enter academy is difficult for all. I mean, for every woman, especially when you are an Arab woman that need to do this. You have to do a postdoc abroad. You have to take your family. Sometimes you need to give up on your family in order to do this path. Not all women are ready to take this path, but also there are not enough positions that are open to are open also to every candidate.
Another anonymous question, to what degree is BGU a leader in this new area of diversity and equality? Have you been able to develop any connections in your short time in this new role with people in similar positions in Israel or abroad?
Yes, thank you for the question. First of all, I think BGU is a leader. There are only two institutions, academic institutions that promoted vice presidents for Arab female vice presidents in this position. BGU and the Hebrew University, Professor Muna Kasabri Khouri from the Hebrew University. The only two of us, the Arab female. All the other universities, in some universities, there is not even an appointment, very highly appointment for diversity and inclusion. And in other universities, there are, but not in these highly level positions. So yes, first of all, I have been able to make some contacts and even to get advices. And we created a group, by the way, with all the women, all of them are female, by the way, that deal with diversity. It says something about the issue that female lead. Women can lead diversity, can lead inclusion, while we see who leads the war now in the world. So yes, we created a group, we discuss issue, we learn also from each other, but again, it's still very, very early because all the positions are just being established. So we are all new in this position and we are eager to learn each from one from the other.
Yeah, let's hope that other universities follow in these footsteps. I'm very curious, a question came across my mind as you were speaking. What was your experience like when you found out that, you've landed this role? And what did it feel like in that moment? Who did you share with first? And all of that, because I know, to get to a position where you are part of the ELT, the executive leadership team, let's say, of any organization, is a proud moment. What was it like for you?
Wow. I was planning on a sabbatical year.
Surprise.
Yeah, I was planning on a sabbatical year, especially after 2 years of Corona, of COVID, of distance teaching, not only distance learning. And then when Professor Dani Khaimovich proposed this position, it took me a few weeks to answer because I needed to think very, very carefully. As a mother of 3 boys, I have 3 teenagers at home. It's a difficult stage, it's a difficult age that needs a mom around them and not a mother outside, most of the time outside home. And then I thought, I'm a strategic person. I plan all that. I try to. I immediately started to think about the strategy. Okay, how I do it. Once I had this strategy, and also I discussed it with my husband, who pushed me to this position. My father also pushed me to this position, and also my colleagues from the department. I said yes. I said I do, and I'm glad. And and that's it. And then I remember that immediately with the receiving this position, few months earlier, I also was promoted to become a professor, an associate professor. So it was as first Bedouin professor from BGU or in Israel as a Bedouin. Then it was all over the news. So I was really overwhelmed by all this news. But of course, I was I felt satisfied. I felt satisfied because I entered this role. I think I also believe that in this age, I mean, I'm not in my 20s, but I had some experience. So I'm enrolling this position from a very with a lot of awareness. Okay, and I know that I came here with a social, feminist, with an agenda to make a change. It's not a personal and individual role. Okay, it is maybe a permanent, I mean, something temporal for maybe a few years to make a change. And when I succeed, if I accomplish this change, it means that my role is not needed anymore. So I hope I will, I could stand in this requirement.
It's one of those catch-22, right? You hope that the role will not be needed down the line, but the work that you're doing is so important. And in fact, we just got a comment from one of our audience members saying your role and leadership is something so many of us were watching with excitement. So many people are wishing for your success in this new and important role. I'll take another question. Do you find that there is interface between members of the various marginalized groups? Is there openness, and are there strategies that you find helpful in this regard?
Let me read the question. Okay. Can you please repeat?
Yeah,
it?
sorry. I think we moved it to the answered. Let me just give me one sec. I'll find it. There we go. Do you find that there is interface between members of the various marginalized groups? Is there openness, I guess, among these groups, different marginalized groups, and an opportunity for communication? And are there strategies that you find helpful in this regard?
I hope I understand the question. First of all, I really don't know what you mean. What do you mean when you say openness among those groups? So if you refer to being open toward other groups, I guess this is the meaning, then yes. I believe that we must, as an institution, we must provide a message. We must send a message, an institutional message to our students and our staff that this is a shared space. This is a space for dialogue. I know that some very few, maybe many researchers, staff, faculty in our university work on the issue of dialogue, of shared meetings, yes, between different groups. But it's under the radar. It is not, these activities are not seen. So I think when this is something that I do or I push from my own office, it is an institutional message to the community, to BGU community, that BGU community or that Ben-Gurion University as an institution promote dialogue between groups. So like I said, this is something that I work on now. And we are going to start with creating these diversity ambassadors from the diverse groups in campus to make them lead it. They have to lead it in the ground, because I believe that students have they're more creative maybe than us, and they know the ground, yes, more than us. They're more close, to other students, and they have amazing ideas. Like I said, my dream is to establish a unit for a shared space where people from very different backgrounds can sit, talk, meet, and just share experience.
Yeah, because really at the end of the day, when it comes to the human level, we're all human and there are some shared experiences and there are different experiences. You got to share both. I think we have time for just a couple more questions. So I'll go through these quickly. What is the state of quality of education in the Bedouin and Arab community presently? You spoke about what it was like when you were growing up. What does it look like right now? What does that landscape look like?
Unfortunately, like I said, on the one hand, we see much more in terms of dropouts, for instance, we can see a progress. I mean, it's really paradoxical situation. On the one hand, we see much more female students enroll into high schools and then into higher education. So there is more dropouts nowadays of boys than girls.
Is there a reason for that?
Yes, there is a reason. The reason is that, especially after the COVID, we see that men or boys, they go to work because of the badly economic situation of the poverty. I don't know if you are not, you know, but 80% of Bedouin families are below the poverty line. And during the learning distances, the situation of the Bedouin educational system and Arab educational system in general became even worse. There were more dropout of boys because the economic situation of their families become bad, and they just went out to the very poorly labor market. So we see more girls, but for girls, they cannot just go to work. If they leave school, they just being married. So it is not an option for them. Today, girls are more, they're more, they just want, you know, they have a lot of passion toward education, to do something with their lives. So yes, this is the reason. And on the other hand, when I look at the general situation of the Arab or the Bedouin educational system, I was in Rahat city, which is the first Bedouin city the largest Bedouin city in the Negev. And out of 8 high schools in Rahat, only 1 high school has 5 levels, physics in 5 levels. I don't know if megamot, it's like you study, you know, the 5 levels for the matriculation exams. So you need 5 points or 5 levels in mathematics, English, and other scientific profession. And physics is taught in only 1 high school. I was amazed when we look today at the future, high tech, engineering, right? We see what I asked myself, what are the and you need to study those professions. You need at least, you need to start to come with physics. In Israel, the higher educational system is different from any other, from the West, okay, from Canada. So you need those levels at your high school in order to get, it's a must in order to study the STEM, you know, the STEM professions. Right. So when a Bedouin child don't have this opportunity, okay, what are the chances that he will become part of this startup nation, of leading in high tech, of leading in this direction that all Western, all the West is leading, is going to. So yes, the situation, from my point of view, still need to be fixed.
Right, lots of work still needs to be done. I'll wrap up with one question, but first a comment from Alti Rodal, who writes, a wonderful voice for marginalized groups, specifically for women more generally, also for what is possible in Israel today. And Susanna Delphin, who will be joining us in just a moment, she asks, how has your position affected your relationship to your community? And we'll wrap up with that question.
I receive a lot of, my community is very proud, is really, really very proud. despite the fact that I talked about patriarchy, which exists in all societies, community leaders, young, are really, really very proud in this accomplishment. And this accomplishment or this position for them is also a way to see that it is possible. It is not impossible. The mission is not impossible. And I have to say that I've been recently being invited to a lot of to talk in front of high school students, in front of even university students, a mission which I really don't have a lot of time for it, but I make the time because it is important for me to talk to the younger generation about my own experience. I didn't tell you also about my postdoc experience abroad in Oxford, but with a family. But it's important for me to provide a message to all young students that if I can, you also can. And I will end here.
Yeah, it's a great message. Please stay with us, Sarab. It's been fascinating. I'd just like to take a moment right now to thank our Ottawa Region co-chairs, Natalie Stern and Susanna Delphin, who asked that last question, for your continued support and for your returning once again this year as the co-chairs of our International Women's Day event. Your guidance, insights, and vision really do mean a lot to us here at BGU Canada. Susanna Delphin joins us now with a message for Sarab.
Well, I guess one of the things that I'm most excited about is how perfect a selection the BGU community made by choosing you, Professor Sarab. I couldn't imagine them choosing anybody better to fulfill the position that you're fulfilling. You show such remarkable sensitivity, intelligence, openness. I can't think of the number of adjectives that describe you are really have filled a whole page that I'm writing in front of me. The fact that you're realistic, at the same time non-judgmental, the fact that you're so hugely intelligent, that you have such integrity, commitment to furthering not only women, but also women, but also members of all diverse communities. And that's not an easy role to play, because so many communities have so many different challenges that they have to overcome. And you're being at the helm to try and do this, I think is quite wonderful. So I want to thank you, Toda, Shukran, and all the best from all of us as we look forward to hearing more of your successes and the challenges that you're meeting in this role. And thanks again from us women in Canada. You're inspiring us. We know we've had challenges that we've overcome as women through the years, but to hear where you came from is pretty remarkable, and I'm sure will inspire all of us. And I'm going to pass this on to my granddaughters so they can know too that there's an inspiration for everybody ahead of us.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Susanna and Sarab, thank you both. Really appreciate it. And a reminder once again to everyone who's in the audience with us, we have a series of upcoming events, some virtual, some live, and in person. We look forward to seeing you. And to learn more, please do head to our website, www.Ben-Gurion.ca. Thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again at our next Webinar Wednesdays event. Take care.